Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share an update on my experience with the Surface Laptop 3. This is the 15-inch version, Core i5, 8 gigs of RAM, and 256 gigs of storage. For those of you wondering whether or not this is the right laptop for you, hopefully I'll address some of your questions through the course of this update. Overall, my experience has been very good with this machine, and it is driven by an AMD CPU and GPU, something we've never seen with a Surface Pro device ever. So Microsoft kind of throwing a dart in the dark, seeing if the wind takes with this and whether or not customers will be interested in this machine regardless of the fact that it's the first one not sporting an Intel processor. And even though basically every laptop right now is all about Intel's 10th generation refresh, this one, of course, is not. And that's why I really see this as being a complete Apple competitive piece, if you will, because it's Microsoft testing not only their market share, but their customers. You know, how loyal are they to what's inside as opposed to who is making the product? Because that's exactly what this is. Very similar to what Apple does year after year, although this is not another recycled part, because Microsoft has never made a 15-inch laptop. They made the Surface Book in a 15-inch capacity, which is arguably their highest-end laptop, in my opinion, and is just about better in every single way than this machine, except for maybe when it comes to design, because I do think the Surface Laptop 3, when it comes to design, is the laptop to emulate. But having said that, it does emulate what Apple's been making for many years, in my opinion. We've got a really nice, large touchpad, nice keyboard, the power button right there on the keyboard itself. Really no ports on this machine at all. You literally have, Type-C port, a Type-A USB 3.0 port, or 3.1, excuse me, and that's it. No micro SD card slot for storage expansion. We don't have a 4K display. Even though this is a 15-inch display, you're looking at a 2K really display. I mean, yes, with the aspect ratio, it's higher than 2K, but the screen still has great quality because of the panel type and the manufacturer of said panel being one of the best in the industry. But when it comes to color accuracy, things of that nature, typing in the wrong thing, you're not going to see the performance you will out of other laptops in this space. And that again reminds me of Apple. How loyal are you to the brand? Because they've built, they being Microsoft, they've built a beautiful machine here, and the AMD processor as well as GPU can stand up to the competition. I have benchmarked it. It performs. I've done a little bit of gaming on it, nothing too heavy, because again, this is not a gaming-centric machine. This is the Ryzen 5. This isn't even the top of the line of the 15-inch Surface Laptop 3, but still, it has the chops to game. It has the chops to deal with 4K video edits, raw image photo editing. But the fact that we don't have a color-accurate display, the fact that we don't have a 4K display, those things bother me. Now, they won't bother the majority of consumers. They especially will not bother Apple users that are considering picking up a Surface device. And I think that's the other reason that Microsoft figured this was a pretty safe gamble or bet to make. I'm going to go ahead and throw on some Costa Rica 4K goodness. Granted, we will not have 4K, but it should still look pretty good. And I'm also going to give you a preview of the speakers, which outside of the Lenovo C940 are pretty much best in class for this form factor. So let's get to it. And yes, the C940 Yoga is a little bit smaller than this, but the display is still really nice on the Surface laptop. Make sure the speakers are all the way up. They are not. These get louder than the C940, and they're arguably less blown out than the C940 at the top of the range, but they are not as rich in terms of reproduction of audio, and the subwoofer effect on the C940 is a little bit better, a little more bass to it. Quality here on the display is still exceptional. And I'm not taking a stab at Microsoft with their resolution. It's just something that reminds me of Apple. And I expect more from Microsoft. After all, the resolution on the Surface Pro, which has been out for 7 years, has better PPI than this. And this is a 15-inch laptop. But things still look great. So that's the good news. Now, does the display here, as good as it looks, put it into a whole nother category? No, we don't have an OLED, we don't have 4K, we don't have some crazy brightness level that's going to change your view of how this thing functions. But what we do have that's great is just all-around build quality that is fantastic. And the matte black, I mentioned this in my Surface Pro 7 coverage. People had been asking, is it a fingerprint magnet? Absolutely it is. Let me go ahead and just do a little web browsing. Pen input here, just as good as with the Surface Pro 7. You have the same display type, same sensitivity, and regardless of the fact this doesn't have the most robust internals, forget that it's AMD driven, not Intel 10th Gen driven, and it is a custom chipset for Microsoft, which again reminds me of Apple, it performs well enough that I'm not going to disregard it. It's good. And the touchscreen, overall functionality, you know, there's no bloatware, and that's the beauty of Microsoft. You take this out, and that's another thing emulating Apple with their own OS. Of course, Microsoft Windows 10 is their own OS, but it's on so many different manufacturers' machines, so many different OEMs, and that's where they inject bloatware. Microsoft doesn't do that. And that's part of the beauty of having this machine or the Surface Pro 7 or the Surface Book or the Surface Studio, is that you are going to get the cleanest Windows experience out of the box without doing a clean install of Windows yourself. And that's a big deal. Moving away from this, I'll just show you a quick thing, though, to see how I randomly am touching that, so don't think this is driven by anything. I mean, load times are just really good, and you're not going to find a touchscreen, as you all know, from the Fruit Maker. Let's go over to State News. And again, pinch to zoom good, even when the subject isn't. But, I mean, there's really not a lot of negative things about the Surface laptop if this is what you're looking for. Check out the Red Zone. Keyboard is fantastic. You know, I do, as much as I'm complimenting the design of this machine, it is so plain Jane, however, and that's really probably not the right terminology, just plain, that I feel more could have been done. And I'm not saying that to be critical of Microsoft. It's just that we've got a lot of room here, and I can't help but feel like this is a page from the Apple playbook where it doesn't matter if it's all empty space. I'm all for simplicity. I'm all for industrial design. And again, I do think this is one of the nicest laptops on the market, but it's also not a very feature-rich machine. So that's something you have to bear in mind. If you're looking for a lot of bells and whistles, you're not going to get it with the Surface laptop. Are you going to get a machine that does exactly what it's supposed to? Yes, you will. I might prefer the 13-inch version, frankly, not because of the AMD processors, but I just can't help but feel like this is too large for the pixel density, too large for the performance. If I'm going to take something along that's going to be this large, it's got to be a desktop replacement. That's just me speaking, and that's where the Surface Book, that refresh, will be very interesting, even if you're not a big fan of the design. My pup's crying again, but we'll finish this up. So trackpad's a pleasure, touchscreen's a pleasure, battery life, you're looking at around, in my experience so far, between 10 and 12 hours, depending on your brightness level. That has a lot to do, though, with the resolution of this display. You know, we're beyond full HD, but not much. Just enough that it doesn't take a hit on battery life. So you can game with this. You can certainly do content creation. I'd rather have an Intel i7, but the AMD is up to snuff. And AMD is making their way back into becoming a force in the industry. I won't say a leader. That's going to be hard to pry from Intel's cold, dead hands. So display is good, keyboard's good, trackpad is great. Design, again, I think things could be better. Fingerprint magnet, yes, check. You do have Type-C on here. You have the proprietary Surface Pro charging port there, which still has its place. I mean, a full charge in under 2 hours with that, and you don't have to worry about it getting ripped out. And on the other side, and this is what makes me feel like I'm looking at an Apple machine, of course, headphone jack, Type-C port, no Thunderbolt, and then a Type-A USB 3.1 port. So basically what you've got here is another way to quick charge the machine, another outlet connectivity options with Type-C, and that's a good thing to have on this. but I just wish there was more. Again, one of the nicest and best made laptops on the market right now, but boy, do I wonder what they have in store for us in the next generation, and specifically with the new Surface Book, which I hope we get a redesign. I'm not expecting it, but here's to hoping. But overall, I don't think you'll be disappointed with this machine in the same way I don't think you'll be disappointed with the Surface Pro 7. They are unique, they are performers, and they are great looking. It does get hot, but again, that's if you're pushing it, and battery life is solid. Pricing irks me a little bit because for the same amount you spend on this or another one of its iterations, you could be going to Dell, HP, or Lenovo and getting a lot more power for a similar price, but not necessarily, of course, the marksmanship, the quality that you'll get with the Surface Laptop 3. Any questions or comments? Please feel free to post them, hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.